about quality teaching and learning. Of change within UK higher education at the moment. All of you are aware, but we'll go through this in a little bit of detail as we go along. We are in the process of a quality assessment review, where the Higher Education Funding Council of England are assessing quality across all the nations apart from Scotland. We have a proposed teaching excellence framework on the table. It will be laid out in a green paper due before Christmas 2015, and that will be a comprehensive spending review that is to impact on education bodies. Again, we'll talk about this in some detail slightly later. The potential in this Parliament is also very high. So unions, and when we're looking at quality teaching and learning, to me, there's a lot of student protest for against wholesale changes to higher education funding. We want to make sure that as student unions and as students in your student body, you're empowered to say what your education should look like and propose alternatives to the government's proposals. So the purpose of this webinar is to help with the changes that the government are proposing and to quality teaching and learning looks like you in your institution. By the end of the day, hopefully we'll have explored what quality teaching and learning looks like from a student union's perspective, in light of government changes to quality and teaching assessment, support for campaigns run by student unions, and student unions organise around quality teaching and learning. So you, I just possible for you to type in the chat window what your role is, or if you're an officer, what your role is, and what student union you've come from. Brilliant. And letting me know. Going to talk a whistle-stop tour through some of the changes that we're seeing in higher education at the moment. So when you produce series of briefings and guidance on quality assurance and the teaching excellence framework, I'm going to go over these in a huge amount of detail, but they are available on NUS Connect. If you've got trouble accessing them, do please drop me an email and for you. What we look at, for those who might be new to this, is what's been over the past 12 months and where those in terms of teaching excellence. So we have a quality review that's being led by the Higher Education Funding Council for England, for all nations except Scotland. Scotland's taken its own review of its own process. Many of you have been involved in responding to the consultation that ended last month, but we see that is related closer to the institution self-managing its quality process, and so there's been some big questions around the role of engagement in that and what student partnership looks like in a quality system such as that. How plans look like under some, given that a new government has come forward for teaching, and that is the Teaching Excellence Framework. Teaching Excellence Framework later in the presentation. But what likely to be is that quality and teaching excellence are somehow intertwined with the proposed new system, with quality acting as the benchmark for institutions in order to look at how they become providers or how they're accredited to provide education, and then teaching excellence being around the enhancement activities around their teaching. That's what we think at the moment. We're still waiting to see what is in the content of the Green Paper. And is comprehensive spending review having an impact on higher education? We don't know where this will impact on how quality and TEF are implemented, but it's clear that we're going to look at sector bodies merging or different groups being defunded, and so clearly that's going to have a key impact on who's delivering quality, who's got the insight on TEF, and how that works as a whole structure. So really what we've got is a lot of questions and not structures in the process. It doesn't mean that we can't still set out our vision on what we think excellent teaching looks like, what that looks for students, and how we can work as NUS and student unions together to those changes in society. So excellent teaching look like already articulating what they think excellent teaching and learning looks like. And one of the key ways in which they're doing this is through their student-led teaching awards. Now, this is meant to show you an embedded video, however it doesn't work on our webinar system. So what I do is send you a link. This is whole student-led teaching awards video. It's around 4 minutes long. What I'd like to do is go from that link and then back here once you've watched it. I'm going to go and watch it again too, so it should give us an idea of how long that's going to take. Thank you very much. Anyway, please just let me know. I'm going to mute my now so that I can watch the video. Should be coming back now. I'm going to give people who you are ready. I'll open in the chat window. You can have thoughts about that video. How did you find it? Articulates what you think of as excellent teaching and learning, and teaching awards at Union. Yeah, it's staff, isn't it? Those from your union or your institution, and you share them with us, then we can add them to our stockpile. So anyone else? Yeah, something we'll come on to later as well. Lydia's just said that they were Q awards, that mean reaches with academic awards, and that they did acknowledge in that video that it was for support staff too. But we'll talk about recognition and rewards a bit later. Part of what is the idea of the academic community, and that not just being about teachers, but also being about support staff and the students who are involved in co-creating their curriculums. The widest in that academic engagement rather than just focusing on the lecture in a classroom. Forward, the idea there is to just give you some food for thought, connect that when we talk about excellent teaching, things aren't always abstract, necessarily things that happen around board tables. It's about students and students' experience, and it's already articulating what excellent teaching is, what this learning should look like, and needs to be critical in anything when we're talking around the quality teaching and learning experience. I'm going to talk about the assurance process because it's quality teaching and learning. But any questions around how quality intersects with this that you don't think have been covered, please type in the chat window. And please, as we go along, feel free to interject, type, ask questions if you don't understand anything, or if you've got some more questions. That's totally cool. In access on NUS Connect, we have some areas that we thought should be core to an excellence framework, and other than this, but broadly speaking, one was the enable a diverse body of students to develop and develop from their learning. That this will be a one-size-fits-all mechanism, that we not only have to think around institutions and how they're structured, but also the bigger picture around why do institutions attract certain types of students, what to do around equality and diversity. And that leads on to the second point, that teaching experience should create a more inclusive and equitable learning environment in which access and also success, not just to your group, but in terms of what your next pathway is, your sense of fitting into your education should be affected by gender, background, race, sexuality, disability, class, or the categories that we know present barriers in terms of engagement in an environment. So for us at NUS, the idea of excellent teaching can't be divorced in a way from inclusive and accessible education. They have to go hand in hand. We teaching excellence has been around innovating for the 21st century, that excellence should be about looking forward, about creating graduates who are part of communities, who are able to take social responsibility and are ready in, not just in terms of the workforce, but in terms of creating community and moving the world forward. And this particularly around things like sustainability. And if you're interested in sustainability and curriculum development, again, please get in contact and we can talk about that at great length. We should look at recognising and rewarding teachers, professional support staff and students who contribute to the curriculum, as you just touched on there, Lydia, in terms of your thank you awards. Important it is that recognition and reward is part of this, although questions around who should be recognised and rewarded, for example, the institution itself, that the previous stumbling blocks around the implementation of a teaching excellence framework. Again, we'll talk about this in detail later. Mechanism for a framework for teaching excellence had to have built in a way to increase our understanding of how to enable and deliver excellent teaching. That part of assessing it and part that teaching as a whole should be working out how we move forward to implement excellent teaching across all institutions, and that there's some great learning to be had from this kind of if implemented properly. There are two particular key areas of contention at the moment with the government's current proposals. There are a few people who would argue teaching excellence has been important in higher education, and of course it's very important for the National Union of Students to see teaching held to a level of esteem as researchers. We perhaps the right driver is an excellence framework, but it's still important that we're talking about excellent teaching. But these areas of contention that I'll go into in some detail are how we measure teaching excellence and how teaching excellence is recognised and rewarded. Is there any questions? Cool. Okay. The court proposing a metrics measurement system based mainly on student attainment and destinations, graduate destinations in particular, for the teaching excellence framework. Now, this is not at all academics. In the Times Higher Education, an open letter to HESCE and the University University UK chief, has been put 169 signatures from academics across the country to the idea of a metrics plan for the Teaching Excellence Framework. Now, like something that we would agree with as a union of students, that simplifying things down to a metrics base, making everything about necessarily the best way forward. However, Sarana, our Vice President of Higher Education, has this to say: should rise in what to establishing the academic communities they want to see. But I can't but notice that calls to unite and resist marketisation often oppose metrics for metrics' sake, reflective or recognise the oppression in the system they are trying to protect. So that it should be the right measures in order to bring the right kind of changes to higher education that we want to see. These have to be around acts, they have to be around inclusivity, and they have to be around democratising education. And in some cases, the right thing for this. But what we is a mixture of qualitative and quantitative evidence-based measures that enable us to really look at what the quality of teaching is, that metrics shouldn't be dismissed just on the basis that they're metrics, that we should be looking at the drivers behind why they exist in the first place. Some baseline indicators that look at things like the learning environment, academic and outcomes, include both qualitative and quantitative data sets, as I said before, and to take into account the diversity of institutions and students. Look at the Teaching Excellence Framework guidance that we've got on US Connect. Then you'll see these broken down into some more detail. If some of our proposals in more detail, do please type in the chat window and I can go through them a bit more. Otherwise, cool. Second big barrier around the Teaching Excellence Framework that is making it very difficult for student unions, and quite a lot of academics to really engage in it, is the linking the Teaching Excellence Framework to fees. So, the Excellence Framework, this was announced in the budget, suggested by Jos Buzz, is separate from Business Innovation and Skills. So the Teaching Excellence Framework should be linked to an increase in fees. That details hadn't been worked out, that the basic premise would be that if you pass your Teaching Excellence Framework, whatever that looked like, then you would have to increase your fees to the rate of inflation. Now, that hasn't come out yet. We haven't seen the green paper. That's not due until December. We think it will come out sometime in November, hopefully. But we believe that the initial proposal has defeated largely due to NUS's lobbying. Megan and Sarana have been working with people from across the sector, with student unions, to push back on these proposals. However, that means that the fee increases won't be linked somehow to some element of the mechanisms when they're announced. We're pretty sure that there'll be ability to raise fees with elements of the green paper, and NUS will never be able to support any framework that links educational success to fee increases. That's just not possible. So wait and see what the detail is there. Over to you for a little bit now to have a think. I know that's a lot of information we've just rattled through. The Minister for Universities and Science, out of Joe Johnson's speech when he introduced the concept of a Teaching Excellence Framework, and he was talking about what he felt the core aims of a Teaching Excellence Framework should be. And the identification and reward in both financial terms of excellence in learning and teaching, and to aspire to be among the best. So, what is this statement? Do you agree, disagree with? This might lead you to asking bigger questions around teaching excellence, around the government's aspirations for it. So you start typing in the chat window and then chat to one another. I'll type as well and then bring together those thoughts and have have a bit of what it looks like. Thank you. Differentiates between practical and classroom-based teaching. But the cover frame, the Teaching Excellence Framework, is around what it is in terms of the recognition and reward. So they're looking to create a framework, or how to create a framework that has allowed them to link it to fee increases. We don't think that's happen anymore, or at least if it does happen, so rumours are going that it's going to be something to do with that baseline of quality, and so not about teaching excellence. It's not going to be down on the system. The big look around what the framework might look like is a seen as Swan Star framework, so that there'll be gold awarded to institutions, the award level, but at a faculty or course level. So that'd be interesting when you start to think that you could have an institution with bronze, silver and gold award courses, but then an institution that is given an overall score. How might be weighted, what incentives that gives to vice chancellors and senior managers to fund certain courses and others. Like, these are the questions that, until we have all the details, we can't really start to hack and that are connected to it. But you're quite right that one of the big questions that comes up when you're talking about different types of teaching, practical, classroom, arts-based, vocational, like, there's no one-size-fits or whether it's the subject level, whether it's who's learning. It's a big, complicated framework. What I will say is that we have mechanisms in place to look at teaching excellence through the quality assurance system, through the quality code, and there are some elements that kind of overarch all around student understanding, around student learning, but the will be in the detail, and we just don't know yet. But I mean, I think that relates to this idea of to the best. I think that's an interesting question. Research-based institutions be worried. Is the big concern that conversations with the Russell Group, and they say that they believe that there is excellence, and on a par is what you might call teaching. I think that what it's going to lead to for the research-based institutions is consideration around where their funding goes, who they promote. Is it going to be a process, or is it going to be a tick box? What does it mean to and to be the driver? We've been suggesting that fees are not where institutions derive reputation from. It is from their research standings, though, and there is an element of having league table placement, so that'll be interesting in terms of what it means to get awarded a certain standard on the teaching excellence framework. The team is competition-driven, market-driven, isn't about their students, but it's allowed to charge what fees. It's exactly the kind of challenges that NUS has been pushing back at the government. I fundamentally believe that from the government, the purpose of the teaching excellence framework is to make teaching excellent. They want to take it, however, measures and some of the drivers are so market-driven that they're moving away from teaching excellence. I think that this is the way to this is a stick to the institutions with in order to get them to care about teaching excellence. So, again, such student unions should have based on price rather than by course content. We have at the moment, although we have a differential fee market in print, because institutions can charge between 6,000 and 9,000, and the private providers again have a whole other level of reality is that students perceive the system to be £9,000 fees. They apply for UCAS. They're not seeing a differential market in their practical realities. So do we think that students would use university based on price? You to each try and come up and question, how do you define teaching excellence? In light of the code, in light that you've questioned and the market drivers, and teaching, how to define teaching excellence. I'm not looking for a rant of any of our lifetimes, but how would teaching excellence? And how do you think your students, the students at your institution, the students that you're engaging with in your student union, how do you think they define it for themselves? What do they think that teaching is? Take a couple of responses to this, then we go on to thinking about how NUS can help you with this and how NUS can support you in the programme of work across this year. That have come up are students not think excellent teaching is until they're at university. So not really knowing what they're looking for before they start. And I think this is something we should definitely talk about in unions, is how do we provide students with important framework to understand what their teaching should look like, how they can ask for that, how they can challenge for that, because all too often we move from the student experience, or we move from our understanding as staff even as something kind of holy that we can't understand, that about having pedagogical excellence, and things are really important to inform that, but that doesn't mean that we can't create structures and frameworks and tools, kind of things that enable and support students to really look at their teaching, look at their learning, and understand how better to engage in it in terms of from an activist perspective, from changing their curriculums, from understanding what they're getting out of their learning experience. Accessible for everyone in the room, it would be interactive and engaging, and even both to the big societal challenges of today and individual future careers. I think it's a really important point to pick up those, that although it's got to be about society, it's got to be about the wider discourse around education and where our graduates are going into, how they're shaping the future world. The reality for a lot of students, of course, part of going to university, part of taking on further study is around where they want to end up. And the driver for most of us of where we end up is where we work, what careers are, what jobs we're doing, if they're fulfilling. So that's massively important, absolutely. Anyway, agree with the things that are coming up. I think these are the wrong narratives. If you contacted me privately, so I'm just going to share to the space, and we can't sit there with big piece of paper and write these things out and tease them out to really get into the depths of college and learning. So we started to think about some of the elements that make it up, why the Teaching Excellence Framework. I think it's really key for me in particular to take away so that we can continue to help support you, but also to hear from you as student unions is what we can do to help. We're going to out with the green paper coming out around December, challenges and potentials there that will come up both in terms of good things for institutions and student unions, but also things that we're going to be happy around, that we're going to want to challenge, but to open up a space of debate and a space for change, because no matter how prescriptive the frameworks might be when they're put in, they'll be shaped by institutions. So there's a real potential and possibility here for student unions to make fundamental, big changes for students when it comes to how they're engaged in their teaching and learning. To do that, you're going to need support. We're going to need to do things that help you to do that. And in order for us to understand that, we need to start having conversations with you around the priorities, the year ahead, and the things that we can do to help. When it comes to excellent teaching and learning in your institution, what are the benefits of the Students' Union? Just 5. You can send them out to everyone. If you look on your chat window, there's a little box that says send to all participants. So this can be sentences, it can be words, just about some of the things that you're thinking around the background teaching and in your institution. Well, from what we've learned working with unions, so, send to all participants is laid out. Can you send to host, presenter, and... Oh, that's just me. To me, I'll copy-paste it and share it with the group if you're able to share it with everyone. So many policy specialists within student union staff teams. It's not either something that's funding for or it's a nice to have. It's not central to the kind of work that student unions are trying to do at the moment. But learning is ethereal, heart up and down, practical, campaigns-based changes that students can make. That's engaging in curriculum development currently. And places for curriculum development, of teaching and learning, even though we know that students and our officers are involved in this. But actually the unions are seen as part of the wider student experience about today, but it's certainly things we can start thinking about as we go forward. I think there's something to think around course reps and their role, and how we empower course reps to really be around curriculum change and the academic sphere, and not see us surrounding the curriculum like or academic services or provisions available, but really how do we get students in there as co-creators of their curriculum? How do we get them in there making and suggesting module developments and things like that? They're big questions, but I think they're things that we need to look at this year. So we move on to the next little bit. Students identifying their unions with teaching, student curriculum development, teaching learning seen as hard to pin down and to make practical campaigns around, and that sort of education student unions, or even if you're there and you've got this expertise and knowledge and this interest, the operating unions make it hard to carve out time to do that kind of work and be involved in those kinds of curriculum development. Identify features that we think unions might share in common, and start to support you with student unions and working on teaching and learning. What are the things that we can do to enable you to undertake this work? Again, let's do this and chat via the chat window. Relationship with university staff, how do you deal with that? Policy experts that we should, for us, is getting a of how that's best delivered. So, like some of the potential options, there's things like webinars or fake shops. Look, is it about quizzes or just breaking down the details? University staff, this is definitely something, definitely something that NUS can support with, is how you work along academic staff. I think often student union staff and student union officers, not necessarily, it's not academic staff, that they alongside them in ways that perhaps senior or administrative staff in student unions, in institutions, have a little bit more experience and knowledge of working with partners. So yeah, that's really interesting. So some on how you can work with academic staff and supporting academic staff developing partnership. Absolutely, that's something that we can do. Is there stuff we do at the moment that you just want to reiterate that you'd like? Is there anything else we can do to help you with this process? And when it comes to the release of a green paper, help you when it comes to making curriculum change or creating excellent teaching students? Brilliant. Yep. Has any framework briefings to date and have anything to say about those? Or were there things missing that you'd have found helpful? Did you if you did, if you didn't, is there specific reasons? Brilliant. Good. The briefings help you say when you need to update officers. Our officers around tables where they're seen as knowledgeable, they are also able to make the big decisions based on the evidence that we're presenting. Really key partnership between student unions, US staff, and how we bring that together. So at the moment we put them out on JISCs. Obviously not everyone's a member of a JISC. We try and get them out in the briefing that goes out every 3 weeks, I think, from the policy team. There are other places where you think people would see them if we push that for us. Thank you. So, questions I'd like to ask before we finish. Weekly roundup on policy developments, similar to one briefings could be linked to. Yes, so we do a 3 weekly, every 2 or 3 weeks it comes out with the latest developments in policy, with our briefings in it. If you're not on that email list, then send me an email and I can make sure you're on it. And if you're not aware of it, then we'll see how we promote that to make sure that more people know it exists. But yeah, we can make sure you go on it. But yes, we do a roundup of policy developments on a regular basis. In terms of VPs having their different roles, we invest in that teaching excellence, and access to that is spread out to as many VPs as possible. Absolutely agree with you. That's what we do. I think this is about conversations in your institution as well, because while teaching excellence framework work involves residents, Rana and Megan are leading on it. Megan because she's the president and it's a very senior piece of work. Sarana because it's higher education, but also all of our VPs are involved on level because it's such a piece of work involving education as a whole, and it will have knock-on effects for further education, and Shakira is involved too. So I think absolutely there's keys of this, particularly around liberation officers that need to be considered, and we do inform as many students as possible to make it so that we need to make sure that student unions are spreading this around their wider portfolio as well. So if you've got any advice on that too, that would be really interesting and useful. Excellence and impacts of teaching, for example, at this year's Liberation Campaign conferences. Value. So yeah, as a questions whatsoever, please contact. You've got my front of you there. Access it later, but you'll be able to questions you've got. So my address, it's sarah.curtin@nus.org.uk. There's a post on key link. If you could fill in, that would be really helpful to us. Obviously, we'll be working on a lot. So if you have opportunities come up in your institution, you want to ask about officer roles, officers who are involved in work, you spot related to this and it's coming up in institutional panels, anything like that, feel free to get in touch. If it's not myself, it'll be another member of my team who will deal with that. But if you contact me in the first instance, I can make sure that you get the support you need. Thanks for sending. Definitely email me to sign up to any email. Make sure you got all the information you need. If you need anything on NUS Connect to get the Teaching Excellence Framework or the quality paperwork again, just get in touch. Thank you very much. Good session now. Thank you.